Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of the Day Zero podcast. I'm Spectre, and with me is Z. And Auntie may be joining us in about an hour or so. We're not too sure yet, but yeah, hopefully he'll be joining in an hour.
Yeah, it's a
So
surprise when he joins us.
yeah, it's a pleasant little surprise. So let's just jump into the first article. So you know, as is per usual on the show, we're gonna talk
Yeah,
about AI, of course.
yeah. We'll start off, jump right into a little AI topic here. I really like
Yeah,
this one because it's similar to one of the topics we had last week, which dealt with a guy kind of wearing like a picture around his waist, kind of, and I had commented on how but this is a static picture, so you've got
yeah,
somebody that they show up, but or sorry, they won't be detected as a human, but by the side, by all these other frames, they would be. So the cool
yeah.
thing here, this attack that's being suggested, is kind of like a picture or a poster, or in their actual use case, they use the TV with this image showing. But it's basically an image that you would walk past, and as you're walking past it, it might be tracking you, and then it'll start tracking the TV, and you can just walk away, and it'll have lost tracking on you. So actually, I'll scroll down a little bit here.
Okay.
They actually kind of show it off fairly well towards the end. Probably should have preloaded this.
Why'd they have to make the PDF so many pages just to make our stream slower? No.
There we go. So you'll notice it's showing kind of the human tracking as it goes. So, left to right and top to bottom on these pictures. Person's just kind of walking by, and as they approach this TV, it starts to pick up their image. Instead of being, where they are, it tracks them as part of the TV image.
Wow.
And then they can just kind of, walk away, and it thinks that they're still on the TV, as they run away in this picture. And the idea there is, I mean, it's pretty simple. They go through a lot of like their thought on how they kind of started creating this. Reminds me a lot of those. I don't remember what they were called, but like the Google AI art, where if it saw something, you'd kind of like just go deeper and kind of place that image there a little bit more. I'm explaining it really poorly. I think it was like Deep Dream, maybe, or something. I don't remember exactly what it was called. But
Okay.
there's a little bit of training there. I mean, if you look at the actual image that's used, you can kind of see why they don't have a high res of. Also having some scrolling issues. They don't have a high res of like the actual image that they've used, or they might in the one of the appendices. But you can notice like it kind of has a human shape, so you can understand why it's maybe making that mistake. You can kind
Yeah.
of see the two legs there. But I think that's a really cool idea here, especially like the last one I was saying. I don't see it as being too practical yet. This, I mean, it's a TV with an image. You can, if you can control that, you know, this could be used if the tracking was a bit more common. I don't know how common this type of tracking really is. Like, I can imagine maybe casinos using it.
Casinos, maybe like just security cameras in general, but
Yeah,
that's
like, I don't
probably
think
like the
it's
main
going to be
use.
used in a lot of places yet. But still, I thought it was kind of neat, and it kind of addresses the problem I was seeing with the last one, or with last week's one.
Yeah. One interesting quote I noticed though is it said that in contrast, they needed to, enforce some diversity in like the postures and stuff like that and the lighting conditions to make like the adversarial attack more effective.
Yeah, like
Um,
there definitely are um, kinks with it. It's not like a perfect system at this point, but it at least, like in theory, it's a lot more practical of an attack.
yeah. Um, but what I would say is probably more of a practical attack is the next one, which is the DPatch. So I looked into this one a little bit, and I thought it was really interesting because uh basically I remember I'm just gonna scroll down to where it was. I can't remember the exact page number. I think it's around here. But they show a picture of a bicycle. Where is it? Just scroll down a little bit. Oh, I think it's actually up. Yeah.
It's
So
somewhere.
they show a picture of a bicycle, and for those of you listening, basically there's two pictures of bicycles side by side, and it says there's figure A with no D patch and figure B with with a DPatch, and the figure A shows a bounding box around it showing that it's been detected as an object. But in the figure B, it doesn't detect it. But visually, there's almost no
Well,
like.
there's one really key thing though. There's the D patch up in the upper left corner.
Yeah.
That's where I think this starts becoming a little bit more impractical. Is you need to be
Okay.
able to embed this type of image, and they do have a better example of what it looks like in the actual image. It's not just something like you could carry around or do like that. But I think it's an interesting attack nonetheless, because its idea is to kind of mess with how it does the bounding box calculations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, you can see how it just doesn't get a bounding box with this bicycle. But in other cases, oh yeah, here's kind of the close up of what that patch kind of looks like. It's just a collection of essentially pixels, just random colored, well, somewhat random colored pixels intended to kind of mess with how it's going to try and calculate the bounding box. So every time it creates a bounding box, it just puts it around with wherever the D patch is actually located. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on how this would look if it were like in person. I believe though this really needs to be right as part of the image. Just add that in there, and then it breaks everything. You can notice like in this image here, the example, it just basically has bounding boxes, not around the right things, which is kind of what it's messing with, which is an interesting area to go and attack, to not look at just hiding the image or making it think it's something else, but finding a way to compromise that bounding box, which it seems really counterintuitive that's even possible.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that really surprised me as I was reading through here is, it's like you would expect that the bounding box, like if it's detecting something, it should be able to detect where it's detecting it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. You would think so.
So the fact that this can kind of just be placed in the corner of an image and mess with, bounding boxes, even if it does detect something, although it even messes with the object classification. So yeah, I don't
So
know.
I
It's just a weird attack.
so I guess I was a little bit misinformed. I was under the impression that you could actually use this in a real world scenario, like wear the patch or something like that. I didn't know it had like I
I'm
saw that it
not
was directly
convinced
injected
about
into the
that.
image. Yeah,
I
like
mean,
I
because you kind of have to have those exact pixels being seen.
yeah.
So that I think is where you might have some issues.
Yeah. I mean, one quote I saw on there was that it was referencing some of the attacks we've talked about in the past, right? Injecting noise into the entire image, so like the brightness stuff, like we were talking about with the cars and banking left and right and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And they were calling those attacks less practical because you needed to manipulate the entire image, whereas with this you only need to manipulate like
a small
that
area, but you
a
still need
small
to
area.
manipulate the image. And I mean, I'm not sure I totally agree with him, because manipulating any part of the image is manipulating the image. Like if an attacker is able to control the pixels in one area directly, they're likely able to control the pixels throughout the entire image. There are a few places where I can think of where they'd actually only be able to control a small area. Unless it
Yeah.
is like, say, if they can actually just have like the poster being physically present, but nothing else in the paper really seems to indicate that. And like, if that was the case, you would expect there to be a demonstration of that.
Yeah, and you know, it does look a lot more obvious that it's an adversarial image than some of the other ones we've seen in the past. So
Yeah,
I
like
guess that
it's.
conclusion is a little bit weird. I like maybe I'm missing something to make it more practical, but yeah, thinking back
I
on it
mean, of
now, it
course, they
is
want to kind of put this in the best light that they can, and it is true. Compared to other ones, like you have to modify a lot less of the image, but you have to modify it a lot in a lot more obvious way.
okay.
And like I can't think of a lot of places where an attacker would just be able to control like that corner or some little area of the image and not have complete control over the image. The only thing I could think of is like having a small little sticker that you literally place on like the camera lens.
Yeah. I mean, the one area I guess it could be useful is maybe you could hide the patch in some area of an image, but it is like that patch looks like like snow on a
Yeah,
TV
and
when
it
it doesn't
needs to
not getting a
stand
feed.
out too in order to be effective. It's not like one of the ones we talked about pretty early on was where it would kind of add a signal to the images that the neural network would be trained to detect.
Yeah.
It's not like that where it made changes to the entire image, but they were all subtle. Like if you just looked at the image on its own, you wouldn't really notice anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a different style of an attack. We're only controlling one portion of the image, but like you said, I guess if you can control one portion of the image, you could probably control the whole image in almost all cases. So
Yeah, like I can't really think of many cases where you only get that little control, unless it's like, you control a watermark. So I
yeah,
guess that
that's
could
that's
be an
true.
example of a case where you only need a partial. But
Yeah,
I don't know, I feel like that's really kind of stretching it.
yeah, probably.
Especially if your watermark's going to be something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll spare AI a little bit on this episode. I honestly I was thinking this attack was a bit more practical, but looking into it a bit more now, I've changed my mind.
No,
It's
but I definitely like the last one. I really think that's like that one's kind of neat. Yeah, it takes a little bit of the environment setup, but that's also something an attacker could potentially do, like if they're planning this.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, this one
So
I really felt wasn't super practical.
yeah, it's fair. So let's talk about Trust Zone. So do you know? Have you looked too much at Trust Zone Z and your?
Not a trust zone itself, because that's the ARM specific thing, but I am familiar with like trusted execution environments.
Okay, yeah. So for those of you listening who don't know much about trusted execution environments or TEEs, it's basically for isolating secure code and data from what's deemed as insecure code and data. So in products like phones and gaming consoles and stuff, that can even mean that trust zone is technically higher in the trust chain than even the operating system. Um, so it's common for things like crypto, and it's hardware enforced. And one of the more common cryptos, or at least maybe not today, but a few years ago, was ECDSA, the elliptic curve stuff. And this article basically talks about using side channel attacks to break the ECDSA signing keys to be able to recover the private keys, which is quite interesting because like ECDSA is kind of complicated in math, right? Like it's a lot of like what is it, like calculus and stuff involved
No,
in it,
it's not too
or
much calculus. Now, getting into elliptic curves is definitely getting towards the limits of anything that was covered back when I was in school.
yeah,
But I believe it still deals a little bit more like with set theory along the lines of RSA, but goes beyond that into elliptic curves. But I believe, I'm sure somebody with a lot more knowledge would, correct me on this one, but I believe the premise of it is still kind of similar to the group theory stuff of RSA, kind of like the modulo stuff, but you bring in the elliptic curve to that. That said, I feel like I'm completely off base with that. Nonetheless, like I feel like elliptic curve stuff though is quantum secure, or at least some of them are. Not all of them are. So in the future we may see this getting used more often.
okay,
That said,
yeah.
like don't anybody listening don't trust my explanation of it. That's at the very edge of anything I was taught in university.
Crypto's
It's
hard.
not something that I I'm super familiar with.
Yeah. So I will talk about this quote because this is probably the meat of the article, and it basically says a lot of the ECDSA signing stuff is in a multiplication loop, and it produces a nonce. But if someone can recover even just a few bits of that nonce, they can like chain it with other techniques to recover a full private key. And so what they attacked was a table lookup operation, and I think they also attacked another one, like a
The
conditional.
other one was a conditional. There's a conditional subtraction on the based on the last bit of that nonce, and
Yeah,
like I would say, like I mean, yeah, there's already known existing analysis techniques to go from those few bits to get the full key. The details of that are actually in the full paper, which is linked in this, that we don't actually have up. But I mean,
Okay.
the meat of their attack, what's new here, are these two conditional places that actually leak information. Because the loop
Yeah.
itself does do some, tries to secure itself against some of these side channel things. And I mean, going a little bit deeper, like where this is coming from are you've got the secure world, as Spectre mentioned earlier, and the unsecure world, kind of the open world. And both of those, though, um, when the CPU is executing code, it's executing like it sees the instructions and it has those implemented in something called microcode. And in the microcode, there are these kind of like this micro architecture, like structures that are used there. So where this attack kind of comes in is it's basically from the unsecure world, you're able to see, or you're able to at least derive some information about what information is in the cache that was put there by the secure cache. Or sorry, by the secure side. They both have the shared cache. So that's where this lookup happens, and then there's certain artifacts where you're able to discover what was looked up or what's kind of present or absent in terms of the secure world entries into this cache, and that's kind of how they're leaking this information.
Yeah. So I did have a question because it stated that it like both of the locations that they talk about have countermeasures. But they say, let me just scroll to it in the article. But they say that due to spatial and temporal resolution, it's possible to overcome these countermeasures. So, like, I've heard of temporal resolution of like using like it's basically a timing attack as far as I understand it. But what do they? Do you know what they really mean by spatial in this case? Am I
Well, my immediate assumption would be dealing with the space that something takes up rather than just the time that it
okay?
takes to catch it or to look it up.
Because I looked it up and it was talking like when I did a quick Google search of it before the stream, I saw that it was talking about like the distribution of pixels in an image or something like that. I was like, okay, that doesn't really that doesn't really fit into the crypto stuff too well in that regard. I don't think
Yeah, it
so.
doesn't fit here. I mean, they do go into a lot more information on the actual paper, and that also goes into more information about the analysis techniques, also to go from just a few bits to the full thing, or to the full key.
Okay, yeah. So I guess we'll link both in the description. But there's another thing I was thinking about. So I know the PS3 used ECDSA. Do you remember how large the key size was?
No, I mean, I didn't do very much work on the PS3 at all.
Yeah, I didn't either. It was just like they were basically saying that the few bits are enough to recover a 256-bit ECDSA key. And I remember that like, PS3, that's their big like ECDSA is the big crypto. So technically if you could use this attack, you could create like a 3.55 situation on
Yeah, but what architecture was the
servers.
PS3?
PPC.
So, I mean, this is specifically, I believe, in the ARM, specifically in the Qualcomm implementation of the secure
Oh,
executing
okay. That good
environment.
point. I
This
didn't think about
isn't
that.
just a general attack. I mean, I'm sure there are um, attacks that, could be applicable to the PS3. I just don't think this is one of them.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't even think about the like ARM and PPC thing. Man, killing my dreams. Uh so
Yeah,
yeah.
trying to write all those PS3 O days now.
Yeah, we're
Got
going back
tired
in
of the
time.
PS4.
Yep. Yeah, that's basically it. So,
So what is it now? 6.2? When are you releasing that exploit?
my common joke has been May 5th, 2055 or something like that. So,
All right,
yeah,
I will
that's
set a
CTA.
reminder on my calendar.
Yeah, there you go. So, PayPal. So, I think you shared this article. It was
Yeah, I
talking
think I
about
came across on Reddit probably. Honestly, this is part of this is just a pet peeve of mine. Just when bounty hunters try and overplay their issues. But
Oh,
the
okay,
gist
so
of
you don't agree
this,
with the premise of the article then.
um, Well, the title of the article, I mean, asking if I agree with that is one thing, the ability to get user balances and transaction details. That can be a vulnerability, but in this case, I don't think it is. I mean, the gist of what this one is you get an OAuth request link, you give that to somebody else, or like you. So the OAuth request link is basically like you're going to link your account so some other service can perform actions on your behalf. Common example of this, or easy example of this, maybe not common, but for the 0x0539 website, we offer the ability to log in using Discord. So to do that, you register with Discord first. You either click to link your account or click to register with Discord, and it generates this link that goes to Discord, has kind of our own little application ID with it. And Discord's like, hey, do you want to give this website permission to access your... I don't think we request any scope, so I think it only says something like your username or whatever. I don't remember what exactly it says, but it's basically like, hey, do you want to give this site permission to access it? And you click OK, and it authorizes it. And then you go back to the 0x website, and it has this little token that I can then use to make requests to Discord on your behalf. So that's the normal process. So what this is doing is, like, if somebody were to have an account on 0x, and then when they go to link an account, they get that link that goes to Discord, and they give it to you, and they tell you, hey, go check out this link, and you end up linking your account to my account on this other service. That's the gist of what's going on here.
Okay, so it sounds more like a phishing attack than
It's exactly a phishing attack.
Like,
the only real special thing here is that the other application has PayPal in the name. Because I don't understand the dynamics here. I haven't actually used WeChat. And it has to do with WeChat. Apparently PayPal kind of created like a WeChat link or like a application or something. So it shows PayPal, but it's still, you're getting a link from somebody and you're authorizing this other application that has PayPal in the name to see your information. PayPal isn't going to be asking you to authorize PayPal to see it. It's another application. Like, there's no way really that PayPal can prevent this. Like, they have no way to check if the WeChat account it's trying to link to is actually, the PayPal account owner. I mean, it's presumed that when you try and link an account to somewhere, you're linking it to your own account. Like, there's nothing really PayPal can see here that they can prevent or do. It's a phishing attack. You get them to link their account to you.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there is also the limited impact, right? You're not able to send transactions or anything like that. You're only able to basically view the balance and perhaps the transaction history, which is
I mean, unless the
issue, but
unless the account actually, unless the other application actually asks for more permissions, which they don't in this case. In another website, it might. But yeah, in this case, it also doesn't do very much. You can just do whatever WeChat would have allowed you to do through PayPal. So in theory, in the future, maybe WeChat has some paid version or something, and you can make the transaction that way. But yeah, like in this case, I mean, it's just basically the only thing special here is the fact that it's a PayPal in the company name. That's the only thing. I am the way this guy ended it, the last paragraph or two.
Yeah,
it's just right there. So as a white hat for HackerOne, I suggest you do not submit this type of vulnerability to PayPal because there will be no reward. And I mean, it's just come on, man. I mean, I'm 99.9% sure all this guy's doing is trying to get that social outrage by posting this, hoping that people are going to back him up.
Yeah, trying to get that validation, I guess.
Yeah, well, get enough outrage so they pay him out better.
Yeah.
But it's this is not a CVE.
Not a CVE. Okay. No, I mean, when I read it, I was kind of I was thinking this along the same lines as you. This doesn't really seem like it's fair to PayPal. Although, I was kind of reserving a bit of judgment because a lot of there's a lot of supporting images in this article, but they're all in Chinese writing, and I can't understand Chinese. I don't know why the article's written in English, but they It just annoys me, but
Well, because more people are going to read it in English, even though all the pictures are Chinese. But I mean, I've kind of explained the gist of it. You're giving an OAuth link to somebody else and convincing them to link their account to yours.
yeah. So basically, in summary, not a CVE.
Yeah. And I also don't agree. One of the last sentences is also, from this behavior of dealing with vulnerabilities, you can see that personal privacy data is meaningless in PayPal. It's this guy who's trying so hard to
He's kind of
validate, like to overplay his finding.
He's kind of straw manning there, like trying to make it seem like the issue is that PayPal doesn't care about the information leakage, where it's more about how it's carried out than the end result. Is how I
mean, this just isn't a worthwhile issue, I guess you could say. It's not something they could even really go and fix too easily.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some CI. So this was kind of a clever title, I thought. See, I knew there would be bugs here. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with like Git and version control and stuff, CI is it stands for continuous integration.
So this is a little bit more than just Git. It's like Travis and the things that actually build it, not just your version control.
Okay, that's true. Good point. But yeah, it's basically, continuous integration services. So one example of that, I'm going to go back to Git for this, is basically, you submit, like you commit code, and then it will automatically attempt to build that code and run some automated tests.
Well, so Git doesn't do that, though, is my point.
Okay.
Travis does. Yeah. So this example, this whole report tends to focus on Travis. There is GitLab that also does this type of continuous integration. Circle CI is the other one mentioned in here. But yeah, this one focuses on Travis. So, you set up your pipeline. So when you commit to a certain branch, it builds that, it possibly integrates or deploys that. This graph shows it. Like, commit your code change, build, test. If they pass, you just wait for another commit. If it fails, you fix code and commit more code changes, and it builds it and runs a test. And it just kind of does that over and over. Some of them will also deploy automatically for you. But Git is kind of backing it up for telling you like when there's a change or when something's changed to it. But it's these other applications that actually do the continuous integration. Integration testing.
Yeah, so sorry, I misspoke there. I didn't mean like GitHub directly or anything like that. It's the external build systems that are used. And one thing that I noticed was later on in the article, I'll try to search to it. It basically says that they were able to leak access tokens for GitHub through Travis CI, I think. And one of them, actually, I'm going to go to this quote, but basically they managed to get an employee's GitHub access token with read-write access under the Discourse GitHub organization. So
yeah, I was going to maybe comment on that aspect. But I wanted to go just before you jump into that, this whole thing isn't really any sort of new attack. This is just open source intelligence searching. Basically, one of the issues here is that, like Travis CI, these open source projects will have their automatic build. So that way they can show the little build tag on GitHub, like build working, test passing, or build not working, tests are failing. They can kind of show that right on the GitHub page, the application page, or whatever.
Yeah,
and they'll show that. And the other thing, though, is you can access things like logs from that build. So if they put out any sensitive information, indicate what environment variables are being set, things like that, then in the logs, which are publicly accessible when you use some of the public services. So again, they use Travis a lot for this. So travis.org, it's all public. All these build records, you can just go and basically pull them right up and see the build. Travis.com has some more privacy stuff, but it's paid. Okay. So that's where this one comes in with Discourse. Somebody had gone and had one of the tokens right in. Basically, the token ended up in the log, and that would allow read-write access to everything in the company's GitHub. What did they get for it? $128.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add on quickly there. So that sounds a lot like what happened with Facebook and the password logging. Very similar with logging the auth tokens in in like it potentially accessible logs, except the logs are public instead of internal to Facebook. I thought that'd be an interesting connection to make.
I feel like the root cause would be pretty different. Like, I could imagine, again, we don't really know what happened with Facebook, but I would imagine that just kind of overzealous logging. Whereas some of the logging that can expose secrets in like the build log, I don't know, you don't necessarily think about the build log as being your exposure point until you realize that build logs can be public, such as in cases like this, where it's likely, in environment variables that just kind of get output. So rather than being overzealous logging, it's a little bit different, but at the same time, I don't know what actually happened with Facebook, so I can't make that claim.
Okay.
But the fact that he got $128, like, yeah, this isn't a permanent issue. Like, this isn't like, a cross-site scripting where somebody can just go and attack it right away. But it's really, like, basically, he indicated, like, several places he found these tokens, and this was the lowest payment that he received for them. And it was read-write to their actual company GitHub. Yeah, no further information was given. I mean, at the same time, though, if they don't have if this isn't part of the scope for the bug bounty, then, should he expect to get paid? And I mean, I would argue no. Like, if it's out of scope, I don't know what the scope is for Discourse and their bounty. That said, a lot of places, things like this would be considered out of scope because this isn't in their application code. So they would not consider this in scope. So what might have happened is that somebody on Discord was like, this isn't in scope, we shouldn't pay this out, and management's like, nope, we're not paying. But then somebody's like, no, this is a serious issue, we should pay this out. So like, fine, just pay them, the lowest thing. So it was basically somebody fought to get even that. I don't know if that's the case. Again, I'm just trying to be charitable with some of these things. Say perhaps,
advocate.
Yeah, like perhaps, this 128, like maybe they weren't going to give him anything. So at least, somebody tried to give him something. I mean, it's laughable, but if it's not in scope, I can completely understand, not paying it out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just because I'm more of a cynic than you, but it almost kind of seems like almost like a screw you kind of thing. I guess a complete screw you would just be not paying it, but like, I don't know. It just
sure. I actually agree with you. Like, I do think that. Like, personally, that is my thought. Okay. But if it's not in scope, that's kind of the other thing. Is things like this usually aren't in scope, which means like it's if he actually tested it to see what permissions that thing had, it's actually illegal. It's not just like, oh well, I'm a white hand, there's a bug bounty. Like, no, if it wasn't in scope, it's legitimately a crime. Again, I don't know if he actually did that. Well, he did push the one file, but we don't know if that was kind of like to prove, like, after being in contact with them.
That's true. I didn't see anything mentioning that, so I guess it'd be we can't really guess.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of handling it somewhat wrong. Like, this is definitely an issue. It's somewhat common too, but I've got to raise the question about what the actual scope is, because this is something that is often just not in scope.
I mean, we could, I don't know if I could try maybe pulling up the HackerOne profile and seeing if it would list it. I don't know if I don't really use HackerOne. Do you know if there's like an overall list of what's in scope?
Scroll up just slightly again.
Oh wait, I think I see it here. We're not interested in SE. Okay, yeah, so it actually does look like it's not in scope. So they actually have $128 here for a medium risk triage. So an exploit that causes user to perform an operation.
Yeah, well, it's explaining what CSurf is.
Yeah. So would you say that this issue is more severe than CSurf and thus should have warranted a higher payout than $128?
Well, so I mean, their next example though is like XSS and just exploit resulting in privilege escalation or downloading a site database. Like, they don't explain those too well as being medium high. I mean, the thing is, if they don't actually include in scope their CI build, this is really like all of these issues talking about here, they're all things in a web application.
Yeah.
None of these are things that would be in the CI. So this is information disclosure, basically by employee. I'll say incompetence. I don't necessarily think that's true, but the gist of it. It looks like their whole bounty here is focused on web application issues, which makes sense. Most things focus on having their bounty on their application itself. What are the exclusions down at the bottom?
Denial of service, spamming, social engineering, any physical attempts against discourse property.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not
doesn't really fall under that.
I mean, it
those.
could. You could call it under social engineering, kinda. I mean, it didn't really require any, but just in the sense of the information disclosure in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a stretch.
Yeah. I mean, after looking at that, maybe I like their payouts are already pretty low. Like critical exploit resulting in privilege escalation, $512. Well, it does say plus, but I mean, $128. I'm a little bit more accepting of it now, looking at their HackerOne page, to be honest.
Well, I mean, most sites don't pay out very well, like $512.
Yeah, they just don't have the resources to do it.
That right? Web apps just don't pay very well. To be honest about it.
That's why I don't do web app exploitation. I don't know if I'll get into it in the future, but it's just well, it doesn't pay well and it seems very well, actually I like this issue. I think this is a really interesting issue.
Well, so this isn't really something that would be counted. Like I said, it's not in scope for a lot of things. It's open source intelligence is what this is.
Yeah.
So it's something that like a pen tester doing recon could come across.
Yeah.
You'd imagine like somebody who's targeting kind of the whole of discourse, like the company, not an application, which HackerOne generally tends to be more AppSec focused.
Yeah.
I mean, that said, I do think things like this are absolutely issues that, people need to fix and stuff. It's just, I also understand when they define a scope more narrowly to just the application, something like this kind of comes in on the side.
Yeah. I guess the more important focus of the article isn't the, hack against Concourse specifically, but I think what's more important is just that exposure of getting that information out there that, hey, these logs do actually log important information and you probably do want to look through those because there's probably a lot of repos out there that have continuous integration, that have these logs public, that have the same kind of vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
and being
so it
able
looks
to
like
hijack a repo is a pretty, that's a pretty big impact.
Yeah, it looks like Travis at least has started trying to censor these things. Like when you print an environment variable, if it notices the variable it ends like with username or with key, it'll just replace that with secret. And okay. I mean, yeah, this is absolutely like it is an issue that's reasonably widespread. Like it's out there. This whole report isn't really about any sort of new attack. It's more about some techniques that this guy used, some little hints and tricks. To find the right variables, how to start searching, some Google search start like not really dorks, but like some things to kind of get you started. It's a good overview of looking for this type of information in CI logs. It includes like a little bookmarklet to try and find the CI page from a Git repo or from a GitHub repo. Little things like that just make the work a bit easier to do. Like it's a great little write-up and stuff. It's not a new thing, but it's worth a read if you're interested in this.
Yeah, it's just honestly something I personally never thought about. And I actually do have, I am involved in a project that has continuous integration. So I think after this, I may actually take a look at it and see if it has this kind of stuff too.
Oh, see what type of information you're leaking?
Yep. I mean, there probably isn't any, but I'm safe, of course. No, I will take a look at it, and like anybody who's potentially listening, on the VOD or live or whatever that has continuous integration. If you haven't thought about this kind of attack, and I know I sure haven't, it's probably interesting to take a look at this article. See if you're.
I mean, logs can turn up a lot of interesting information, CI or otherwise.
What's that? Sorry, can you say that again?
Said logs can turn up some interesting information, CI or otherwise. There's, what's getting logged can sometimes surprise you.
Yeah. So we're gonna go back to some cars. Remotely killing car engines.
What isn't surprising is that vehicles or aftermarket add-ons to vehicles are once again vulnerable. So what is it? This case, the attacker finds that in some cases he can kill a vehicle engine after breaking into the GPS tracking devices. So this is something, looks like it's used largely in South Africa. It looked like mostly Africa is what if a lot of things we're reading actually.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So it looks like it's used by like. Well, I mean, at least survive long enough to finish this episode. Then you can do whatever you want. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, it looks like this is the type of thing that an enterprise have a lot of vehicles. It might install in their vehicles, kind of track them. Has some of them, if the vehicle's going under like 20 kilometers an hour, they can kill the engine remotely through this application, through its little API. And I mean, this thing, so that feature seems understandable. It's mostly for tracking, but, somebody's idling killed their engine for them. They do have to be moving slow or be stopped for that. But what happened here is, and this is really an example of why you don't use default passwords, just don't hard code a default password into something, is basically the attackers just brute forced the unique ID numbers, or is it IDs or usernames? Either way, use brute force just with that default password and found a ton of accounts that are still using the default password. So log in and do everything.
Yeah, and I mean, it is kind of incredible how common that is, right? Using default passwords or using really weak passwords. And this is one area where I feel like default passwords shouldn't even be a thing in something this critical. Would you agree on that? I feel like they should prompt you to
I mean, I don't think default password should be used, period. I don't think anything should have that backdoor password, the default password, just at all. Application.
I don't think so either, but I think especially in this case, I don't think it's should be.
That said, if you're going to have an argument for anywhere that it could be used, it's where things like this, it is these embedded devices where it's not so easy to just generate a new password or force a new password to be used, where there are complications. If anything, these sorts of embedded devices are where I think you could argue for it to be used.
Yeah.
Not that I would argue for it to be used, but these are places where I could see it being used.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to clean up a little bit. I can't believe that happened, man. I was just taking a drink and then that was fun.
Can be hard sometimes.
There's going to be some cleanup after this episode.
But yeah, so I guess I'll move on. That's the gist of the attack, is he brute force using the default password. But the way he handled this, the way the hacker contacted the company asking for a reward. I mean, that's just ransom. That's just asking for a ransom. And that's what the company actually said in response. If we pay you, you will give us a tool and will not hack our account again. How can we be sure about this? Sorry for too many questions. This is the first time we meet. This is disaster. I mean, the company's right. This is somebody who has found an issue and is now asking for money. I mean, I don't even see this as being white hat at all. I think this is just somebody who legitimately wanted to kind of ransom the bug to get some cash out of it. Didn't get it, so they turned to the media.
I mean, even this quote right here, I can absolutely make a big traffic problem all over the world. I think that's kind of disingenuous because, these ProTrack and iTrack applications, I've never even heard of them before. I mean, I'm not too big into cars and add-ons and stuff, so maybe that's why, but I feel like that's just trying to blow it up to make it sound more impactful than it is. I mean, it is impactful, but I mean, it's another case, I think, of just trying to, use the media as a medium to try to get what you want.
It does show a lot of uses over here in Morocco alone. That's a fair number of vehicles in the screenshot active at that moment.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, it definitely seems somewhat regional in terms of the impact. I've also never heard of these, but it's also not something I'd look at getting. I'm not really in the market for like an enterprise vehicle management system.
I just prefer cars that are just, a box with 4 wheels and an engine. Like, I don't think we need to
I
add
like
all this other
seats,
shit on there. And seats, yeah, I guess those are important too.
seat belts, media system.
Well, contained media system, like maybe a radio. I don't like, I don't think we should have a web browser in our dashboard.
No, but I do need IRC. So at least a terminal.
IRC.
As long as I can get links.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, it looks like they have their share of the market in some areas. I'm doubtful about he can shut off the engines of hundreds of thousands of vehicles, just because it's not every vehicle, by the sounds of it, it's not every vehicle that can be have the engine turned off, and even those that can, they already have to be stopped or going quite slow.
I was gonna say, didn't it have to be less than 14 miles an hour or something like that?
Yeah, less than 20 kilometers per hour, which is roughly
20,
14 miles.
Yeah. So, I mean, another like takeaway I think is I'm not a fan of when people especially use the media to try to like get their way and get paid out for bugs when there's no indication that the company is willing to do that. But
well,
on the
it
flip
literally
side,
is ransom at that point.
yeah. But on the flip side, I do think these companies should have bug bounty programs if they're gonna, like just because of the potential impact.
So a bug bounty is really just a sign of a mature security program in a company.
And obviously,
so
this company doesn't.
When a company isn't mature, then it just doesn't make sense for them to have a bug bounty. That said, I do agree with you. Like, I do think every company should have a bounty, or should at the very least have a means of reporting these things and have something. But at the same time, when they don't, that is the company's choice not to have that, and we just have to leave it at that. Like, if you do that, if you do start looking at them, then you are facing the legal consequences of that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for all companies, I mean, that I could see people saying that's too much, but what I mainly mean for is like anything to deal with cars, like anything dealing. I think if you wanted to put it into more of a legal nomenclature, I think anything that deals with real world objects like cars, then security should like be enforced on those companies. So mature security.
Sure, but I think there
policy.
are some requirements, from like in the US, the I want to say FTC, but
I think it would be the FTC.
Federal Transport something. If that's C or if that's something else.
FTC is Federal Trade, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. I mean, yeah, it's just I think we need more secure standards on things that deal with potential killing machines.
Well, so I mean, with Comma AI, if you remember that with GeoHot, that got shut down over essentially not doing the appropriate testing, and perhaps that's why we haven't heard of this thing, in the US and Canada, is because it simply hasn't even tried to pass any sort of safety metrics for that. So whereas they might be okay with it in Morocco, maybe not so much in the US on US roads.
Yeah, that is a fair point. That it's obviously in other parts of the world it's probably easier to get by with looser security standards than in the more
like all the countries mentioned, like Morocco, Indonesia, they're not exactly countries that I think that when I hear their name I think safety or like road safety.
Yeah. It's fair.
I'm trying to find the list of countries here again, but yeah, South Africa, Morocco, India, Philippines.
So
none of those.
It says in a handful of countries around the world, but I don't know if I'd really like those are all in relatively the same.
The Philippines and India are definitely off from South Africa, Morocco, and then even South Africa and Morocco are on opposite sides of Africa.
Yeah, but I feel like you're ignoring a lot of like Europe, North America.
You're missing all the places that have like better standards on it. So I wouldn't
Yeah,
be surprised to find out that these just simply were not available because of the standard requirement, like because of the hoops that they need to jump through in the more established countries.
yeah. So yeah, I guess that'll wrap up our car uh, cynical discussion because our next article is on Windows 10.
Yeah, well, kind
Security.
of Windows 10. It's about the
Okay.
security baseline. So this mostly impacts kind of the defaults for Windows Server for enterprise users, not so much your average user. And the main thing I just want to talk about here was just the removal of password expiration as being a default. So I think it was like 90 days or something
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. That
that
was
it would
common in
expire
enterprise.
it, and now that's not part of the default anymore, or won't be as of the May update.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on password expiration policies?
They annoy me quite a bit.
They annoy me too, but I mean, like, what do you think of them from a security stand? Like, do you think they're effective?
Well,
I
so
guess.
they can be. I mean, the idea of the password expiration is that you have a password that's strong enough that even if it is compromised, so even if the hash is compromised, that is, the hash can't be broken before the password expires, or shouldn't be breakable before the password expires.
Okay.
That's kind of the gist of it. So no password that's active should be compromised before it's expired. The passwords then need to have the complexity requirements and all of that to say that it shouldn't, or that it should have this much entropy so that it takes so long to actually break. In theory, obviously things can be broken quicker or faster, whatever.
Yeah.
But in theory, it should provide enough security that it should last until the expiration at least. And in
I
that
guess.
sense, it does offer some security having that routine, but people end up making worse choices about their password. They start reusing things that starts like, password one, then the next time you have to change it, password two, password three, and then you've kind of lost the security.
I mean, my counterpoint to that would be any password hash that could be broken in 30 to 90 days. It's probably already too shitty, anyways. Like I
Well, it's
think
at
even if
least
you,
that long. It's not that long. It's just like it needs. The idea there is that it won't be cracked in less than that time. I mean,
yeah,
it could be pushed to be stronger, but the password needs to be able to and can be shown that it can hold up for at least that period of time.
yeah. I mean, I feel like I'd be a bit more okay with it if it wasn't so frequent. Like, I feel like if it was every year or 2 years or something like that, you had to change your password, I'd be a lot more okay with it. But like you said, when you start getting to a monthly basis, coming up with passwords can be hard. So it's way easier to just tack on like the month or something onto the
Yeah, and
password, which just
for
makes
what
it
it's worth,
less
like the
secure.
NIST standard, like
Oh,
the
say that again, sorry.
the NIST, like NIST 863 or whatever it is, like the
Okay.
standard for like digital identity security and stuff. The most recent update, which I think was still a couple years ago, like it was in 2017, I think, but they dropped password expiration checks from being in their recommended process. What they did add was checking dumps for the password and blocking passwords based on like if it's been found in a password dump, then they can block it, but they shouldn't have any other requirements. No
Yeah.
complex, like they also push for no complexity requirements. Just allow at least 64 characters, minimum 8, and no other complexity checks, expiration, reuse. Just check the dumps, make sure it's not in there. That's optional, but suggested. And I mean, since that removed it, I think that's why we're seeing Windows remove it also. And I
Yeah.
mean, like I think it's a good move. I think there's better security options that are less of a hassle for the user. I think in the Windows thing here, they actually talk about 2FA.
Yeah.
And I mean that is absolutely a useful security process.
Yeah. And another thing they mentioned is enforcing banned password lists. So like I guess checking common dictionaries and
Yeah.
banning passwords against those, which I think are both better, like even individually better than password expiration policies. So both of them, like I is this like a planned thing that Windows is going to do in the future? I don't think it already does this, right?
I don't think so, but that's something that's kind of been getting, like, the technique itself has kind of been getting some popularity in the last couple of years, especially since Have I Been Pwned released like their password check thing, where you can actually check your password to see if the password has been pwned anywhere, and like provide an API for that. And since that, there's definitely been kind of an uptick in, or at least I've in discussion involving that type of security. Like, I think it's a good move. That is stronger, I think, than forcing the reset. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, one of the few times I didn't write down the password itself, but that I wrote something down to remind me was when I had this account that every 60 days, the password needed to be changed. And, being good, I didn't use like a similar password between all of them, like just going from 1 to 2 to 3 or something. But that was one of the few times I could have used a password manager for it. That I didn't write the password down, but I wrote down enough that I could recover it. And like, that absolutely was not a secure thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's only because I couldn't keep remembering them. Because it got to the point where I wouldn't remember what the password was, so I would try a few, and then I would lock myself out.
Yeah, yep,
So I guess being combined with the too few failure attempts.
Yeah.
Which, just on a side note, the failure attempts, it makes sense to lock people out for a time on failure. I'm not against that. But too few is a really big hassle for users too. Like having too few attempts.
Yeah. And outside of the passwords, I'm not going to talk about this one too much, but they also, another one I found kind of cool was the SVC host mitigation options policy. So that basically just makes it so that any binaries loaded by SVC host have to be signed, digitally signed by Microsoft. So it makes it harder to use that to load malicious code. But it says please pay special attention to this one because it could cause compatibility problems. So if you're using any like third-party code that doesn't have the signing, then it won't be allowed to run. So that's just one of the other things in this policy. There's a few other changes that they've made, but
yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't read through everything. I really just wanted to bring this up to talk about the password stuff.
To be quite fair.
Because, I mean, that I think was kind of the interesting thing out of this is, actually, to be fair, the mitigations are always somewhat interesting with Microsoft is bringing in, but kind of the thing that got picked up by news was the password. And to be clear, like, they're not removing the ability to have passwords expire. It's just not the default.
Yeah. So it's still there for those of you who want to use that stupid old thing, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some standards that want it, or like companies that will only work with you if you have these sorts of security processes in there, and stupid things like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about some NFC stuff. So I didn't get a chance to read too much of this, so I'm gonna let Z, if you could break this down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole paper itself is kind of a nice little introduction into NFC. Really high level overview of some stuff, some of the core concepts, and they introduce these two attack ideas. Where the gist of it is they call them wormhole attacks, where the idea being that you can read somebody's NFC payment card in one location and actually use it immediately in another location, kind of transferring that data through they call it a wormhole, to pay elsewhere and like, fraudulently make purchases that way, seeming like the card's in somewhere else when it's not, or the card's in multiple areas when it's not. So it had like the start of its lot of introductory information, talking about different cards, talking about the difference between RFID and NFC, a little bit of like the security in general. But the focus of this, like I said, is on these two wormhole ideas. So, like I said, there are two. One's a smartphone-based wormhole where you use two smartphones and a server. In this case, I say server. What the server is just a laptop on the Wi-Fi network, or like something that both phones can connect to. So NFC gate, they use that as an application to relay the NFC information. Basically, one phone acts as the reader, and another phone acts as a card emulator. So you pretend to pay with the other phone, and you read it off somebody else with the first phone.
Okay.
First phone takes the data it reads, sends it to the server. Server sends it to the one that's pretending to be the payment card. Pretty simple idea. It just proxies it, like read it, send it elsewhere. And then the second one is using Proxmark to read it instead of the one phone. Other than that, it's the same. It just has a better reading distance.
Okay.
So
how?
No. Go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, how far away are like the wormhole you were talking about with using it, using another phone to emulate the original NFC? How far away would that be? Do you know? Is that like within the
that can be like, that's kind of their thing here. Is that can be almost any distance because it's going over Wi-Fi. Well, it's hitting Wi-Fi, so their example was reasonably close, but there's no reason that wouldn't work over the internet. So it can be anywhere.
Well, my main thinking was just that, I feel like if you use something like that, it could be easily detectable and blocked or flagged.
How
like,
so?
I don't know. Like if you see, something that should be specific to one phone being used in one location, and then it's being used in an entirely different country within 10 minutes.
Well, so it wouldn't be used like this would be somebody walking around with their reader, scanning the card while it's in your wallet in your pocket. Okay. This isn't like them tricking you to scan your card on their device where you have like a fake payment. And yeah, I mean, banks and all that, they do look at that for fraudulent purposes.
Yeah, like
they do look at the distance, but like the attack itself would work anywhere. If the person just bought something in Kansas and then they're all of a sudden using it in Morocco, yeah, okay, fraud's probably going to pick that up. But, like in terms of distance, so like that's not a limiting factor here. And they did this using like Apple Pay and some other things too, or Android Pay was another one I think they used. So it wasn't just like credit cards. They did this with the smartphone-based NFC payments also.
Which I do wonder if those also have the same kind of anti-fraud protections as banks and stuff do. Maybe not to the same degree.
Well, I haven't used Apple Pay, but I have used the Pay on Android. I'm not sure if it was actually Android Pay, but essentially I still had to link it to my bank account. So like my bank's fraud protection still would have been in play.
Okay.
Now perhaps like the Apple Pay, you need to put money into it and they're like being their own payment processor, in which case you might be right, like they have different security process. But like when I've used that off my phone, my bank has been involved with that.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just looking here in this section 4.2, and it says, as described previously, NFC itself has little inherent security, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we're talking about though is the banks detecting fraudulent purchases. NFC itself isn't a source of much security. I mean, think about it. You're just tapping your card. Like, what security could there really be there? I mean, it tries to do a little bit to ensure like there's this real-time transaction and stuff, like that actual card's present. But like, there isn't a lot that can be there too.
Well, I mean, against this attack specifically, I feel like there should be. I think it talks a little bit about this with Apple Pay that they try to do, but like one-use tokens. So having like if you
well, so you would read the token and then use it somewhere else though for that first time. That wouldn't really prevent it.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I'm just thinking, but if the token is used after the person who has the original phone already uses it, then it would block.
I think time-based tokens can be a thing because there would be a time delay between grabbing this token from somebody and actually using it. Like, it's unlikely that you're going to read it from them in like the same 5 seconds you're going to be able to spend it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing, I think, could be in place. I don't know what NFC really does there. Because I do know there's some crypto involved somehow, I believe. I don't really know NFC technology. Since you had submitted this link, I thought you were going to be talking about this, but
Yeah,
but of course you
I
just kind of dropped the ball there, right?
yeah, I know. I'm a bad person. Yeah, it's just a busy weekend. I did want to get to it because I do find the entire like system of NFC interesting, just because it's starting to pick up a lot of steam. I used to work at a grocery store,
Yeah,
and
well,
I
it's
didn't
being
see
picked
it.
up in the U.S. finally.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work at a grocery store, and I didn't see it too often. But towards the end of where I was working there, I did start to see more people using their phones to pay for stuff, and it's not to the same degree, but it kind of reminds me uh, of the car stuff, and that it's again another critical area that's not really being thought about too much in terms of security before it's just being thrown out into the wild.
I
At
don't
least
know. I
in my
mean, there
opinion.
has been some security about them. The thing is that the card issuers have actually kind of been pushing back against that. I don't know if you've heard the story about Mythbusters wanting to talk about RFID security.
I actually didn't.
Yeah,
Can you
so
remind me a bit of that?
Mythbusters at one point actually wanted to do, some myths about RFID. So this was before the NFC stuff, before just tapping to pay. So this is still chip and pin, but they had wanted to do that, do some myths on that. They haven't shared too much about it because essentially they wanted to do it. Their lawyers got involved, and then the lawyers from like Visa and MasterCard got involved, and they're all on this call, and they basically say, no, you can't do this, or we will like pull all funding. Like I don't know, I don't remember exactly what they would pull or what they would do, but it was enough that like Discovery pulled off of this. Like they were not doing it because Visa and MasterCard would not support them talking about the security issues in the RFID chips, or
Of
just
course.
the lack of security in general. So, I mean, it's not so much that people aren't looking at it. So there have been a lot of things said about NFC security, and it's just generally it's bad.
Yeah, but it's just that a lot of people probably don't even care. It's just a convenience over a security thing.
Yeah, well, I
Because
mean,
tapping is
it's
just so much faster than entering, putting the card in, waiting for it to connect, entering the pin, waiting for that to go through, and like it's just like
I mean,
tapping
it
is just
is
such a
better
higher
than
bandwidth.
magnetic strip.
Oh, it is. Yes.
Which at least the US is finally starting to move away from as of like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's like until a couple years ago, every time I was in the US, I was still striping my Visa there every time. It wasn't like Europe's had chips for a long time. Canada's had them for like 5 to 10 years now.
Yeah, we've had them for a while.
Yeah, we've had them for a while, not quite as long as Europe though. And then the US is like just switching now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, overall, I guess the weak point is always the person, right? So like
Yeah,
even
I
for
mean,
the I
this
guess
whole attack, like the wormhole thing, I think it's a neat little idea.
sorry, can you just repeat that for a
The
sec? You
whole
cut out there.
attack, like, I think it's kind of a neat little idea. This wormhole thing too.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Send it off elsewhere. Like, it's a neat idea.
It is kind of a sophisticated attack, so I'm not sure how
Well, it
often it would
takes
be
some
carried out.
hardware. I'm not sure I'd say it's that sophisticated.
Not
Maybe.
yeah, but that's what I mean. Like maybe not sophisticated in terms of how like difficult it is to pull off, but just like yeah, you do need that other server or fake, uh, something to send it off to and stuff. So it does require a bit of a setup to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, where I could see it being more interesting is less like not so much widespread attacks, but like targeted attacks.
Well, because you
That
have
could
to
be
be so
interesting.
close to actually do the reading here. In this case, like
Yeah,
Proxmark is like 5 centimeters, and your actual
like it's
phone
probably
is
not
like a
something you're gonna
centimeter.
get hit with, you know.
Well, I mean, if you're standing in line behind somebody at like a coffee shop, like you could probably do it, or in line at DEF CON.
Or in line, yeah. Take your credit cards with, or take your phones with payment stuff on them and credit cards to DEF CON. Totally not a bad idea.
Oh, it should be fine.
Yeah.
I was fine.
Yeah.
Actually, I do think one of my credit cards got cloned while I was at DEF CON some years ago.
Oh, really?
I think so. That's like, I'm not absolutely convinced to have him at DEF CON, but that seems like the most likely case, is that it happened there. Although it wasn't used for a while afterwards, so maybe not.
Yeah.
But it seemed like DEF CON was related to that. I don't know for sure. Obviously,
Yeah.
everything's fine, but and it wasn't NFC either.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I think we're talking a bit about this before the stream. But I think it's worth mentioning in the stream too, as I remember we were talking a little bit about like RFID stealing, and I think the range has been increased. Like the range has been getting better for theft devices, right? Like I think you can
Well,
get within a
people
foot of
have
someone.
done things where it's like several feet away, or apparently, like just collecting all the RFIDs in a room. That was some years ago. I remember there being a demo of that. I'm not sure how similar it is with NFC. I do know they are slightly different. But yeah, there have been
It's probably
antennas
not-
made to do like some much wider area captures of it. I wouldn't say they're super accessible though. Like most readers you're going to buy are not getting you that great of a distance to read from.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be interesting if that kind of range extension could be applied to NFC as well. Because imagine just going to a coffee shop, setting a briefcase down that has a NFC theft device in it down, and if you're next to the line, going to the cash registers or whatever, you could just like steal like 4 or 5 people's tokens at once or whatever for NFC. Like that'd be quite crazy. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know
and
if
I
it's
mean, I
possible,
could.
but
Like, I mean, it sounds like that would be possible now, even. I don't know for sure. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that would be doable with RFID. I'm
yeah,
not exactly sure what the differences are between that and NFC to actually make a definitive claim.
yeah. Yeah, that might be something interesting to talk about if we can find some information about that on the next episode. Maybe during the week we can try to
Or if there's something just
find
gets
something here.
published about
Or
doing
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, that too. Yeah. So we'll talk about Docker. So this was pretty recent. Literally
Yeah,
just
this is
happened a few days ago.
Thursday, maybe.
Yeah.
There are, I have questions about this.
You have questions about it? Okay.
I have questions. So, Docker
So
Hub was compromised. 190,000 accounts, GitHub tokens, Bitbucket tokens, basically the access tokens, really similar to the CI stuff in
yeah.
terms of what was being leaked there. Their statement on Thursday, April 25th, 2019, we discovered unauthorized access to a single Docker Hub database storing a subset of non-financial user data. Upon discovery, we acted quickly to intervene and secure the site. Now, I found out about this super early Friday morning when they were sending emails out to people. But yet it took them until Sunday to actually put this notification up.
Like this page up?
Yeah, this page was up on Sunday. They were sending emails out about it, though, by Friday. And there's just so many kind of weaselly things being said in here.
Okay, so can you point something out that you...
Well, I'll start off by saying, if you remember when we talked about Microsoft, when there's the Hotmail thing, and there just wasn't a lot of information. Do you remember when we were talking about Microsoft the one week?
Okay, yeah.
And I kind of mentioned that, like, I'm happy to see an announcement which there's more information. And I kind of feel the same way with this. They don't have much of an admission of what happened. So, since I mentioned the Weasel things, a subset of non-financial user data. They're not being clear about what was taken. They're just saying it's not financial.
Well, it does say data includes username and
It does say it
password.
includes that, but it doesn't say what information's there. So I think there's more that they're just not saying, and they're choosing to phrase it this way. It's not financial information. It includes usernames and hash passwords. And then, of course, saying it's a less than 5% of hub users. They're downplaying the number of users.
Yeah, 190,000 looks like a big number, so they have to put that less than 5% to, mitigate that, I guess.
The other thing is, they mention it's a brief period of unauthorized access. How long is the
Yeah,
brief period? When was the brief period? Because they tell you to go and check your logs to see if any unauthorized actions happen. Do I look like, when did this happen? Was it on Thursday only? Did this happen on Wednesday and they noticed it on Thursday? Did this happen weeks ago or months ago? Oh,
Yeah,
how
it's very
long was
vague.
this brief period? There's so much information that they could give. I mean, I understand sometimes when they just don't have the information.
Well, I was
But
going to play a bit of devil's advocate and say maybe they don't know exactly when the compromise took place.
they don't provide what they do know either. Just a brief period. If they don't know how long, then a brief period isn't the right thing to say.
They should say an unknown period.
Yeah, we detected they had access on this day in an unknown period before, but saying a brief period, is that 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 hours? You just don't know. Like, there's so much information that seems like they've just phrased things just right so they don't have to reveal it. And I feel like, in the coming weeks, we might find out more about this and find out that's a lot worse than they're making it out to be right now. Purely speculation.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like the way this reads, and the fact that it took them, 2 days to get this type of vague message out when they had already taken action to email people, to reset, to unlink accounts, to reset passwords on Friday. Like that, something doesn't add up in the time frame for this.
And there's also, I just noticed they have kind of a contradictory statement here. They say, for all DocHub users, there is no action required to preserve your security. But then it says a password link was sent to anyone who was potentially exposed, and users who have auto builds should unlinked will need to relink those repositories.
Yeah, so basically they've already taken the action to preserve their security by resetting passwords and unlinking accounts. So they don't have to take
the passwords because they say there's a password reset link.
So you can't log in until you do that, though. One of the other things here is actually saying, why can't I log in? And who's asking these frequently asked questions before they announced?
What will be frequently asked questions? Yeah, I guess potential QFA. Yeah. I mean, it's it's just vague, and like you said, it could be just because they want to downplay it.
I mean, maybe this is better. It seems so suspicious how they've been so vague about this. I just expect better of a tech company, plain and simple.
That's fair, I think, to expect of them. And yeah, like, this is probably the worst part, is the storing a subset of non-financial user data. It's just like,
and just be clear about what was taken or what was in that database.
Yeah. Although one thing they do put here too is we're enhancing our overall security policy, and
because that's really meaningful. We are enhancing, enhance, just like a CSI. You
enhance
see the image, gotta enhance it.
Enhance the image.
I mean, look, I expect better from a tech company. I'm glad they're announcing it. I think it's required now that they actually put out the announcement, like legally required. So, I expect more now.
Yeah, that's totally fair. That being said, I haven't really used Docker Hub.
I mean, I've used images from Docker Hub. I don't use Docker Hub myself. Like, I don't publish anything or have any builds that go out to it. Yeah.
So, moving on to another compromise, we have the eGobbler. eGobbler.
Beautiful name. Yeah.
I know, it's like,
at least this time they gave us information on why it was named that way.
Yeah.
Which is because of the huge volumes of hits their campaigns generate. Gobbler definition: a person who eats greedily and noisily.
Yeah,
because they're a very loud campaign.
For no reason.
Well, we just don't know where Fruity Armor came from.
Yeah.
And if anyone's wondering, did actually talk with Antti, and he basically said that it's up to the companies just to name them however they want. Some have a process, some don't. I was kind of hoping there'd be a kind of standard process, but unfortunately, we just end up with names like eGobbler, which maybe that is kind of fortunate, actually.
Yeah.
So speaking about this, apparently, like, we're talking about how noisy it is. That is, 500 million sessions exposed to it in 6 days, I think is what they said.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to that graph because it was this one right here. It's a bit hard to see the numbers. Oh, look at that. You can click on it. Neat. I didn't know she could do that before. Okay, there we go. So now you can see the numbers a bit better. So yeah, it hit nearly 500,000 impressions on the 0409. Yeah, so the 9th of April. It almost hit 500,000 blocked impressions in the US at least. It has some of the other countries, but the US seemed to
Yeah,
be
it
like
looked
the
like it's
primary
targeted to the
focus.
US.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, this was kind of. So they use session hijacking in a really weird way. I mean, I think this is just kind of because they talk about user sessions being exposed, and what they're talking about when they talk about a session being hijacked, like they don't mean stealing the session cookie. Like I'd normally, if I talk about session hijacking, I talk about a session cookie being stolen so that somebody can perform actions as them. What this is talking about is when the page is able to redirect you to another page. So those ads that will redirect you and like take you to another page without you actually interacting. That's what they're
Yeah.
calling session hijacking. It's hijacking the browser session.
Yeah, and what's really annoying is a lot of those redirects, they'll do some sort of tricks to disable the back button so you can't they'll mess with the page history so that if you hit back it just takes you to different ads or whatever.
Yeah. So
Oh
what's
god, I hate
interesting
that
with
so
this
much.
one though is that it is so with iframes, usually ads are kind of served by putting an iframe in there so the ad can do what it wants and just got a sandbox there. But there's actually these sandbox attribute that can be put on. If you pause right there actually, and these are some
Yeah.
other attributes that can be used to bypass the sandbox. But that will actually sandbox the iframe and it'll do things like block form submissions. Even if the iframe is from the same domain, it'll be treated as a unique origin or like it won't be the same origin, so it can't access like the domain. It'll block. You can block script execution, API like local storage access and stuff. Can't have links in other browser contexts, so like opening a new window, opening a new tab, a bunch of things like that will sandbox it. And what's interesting about this eGobbler is their technique for getting around the iframe sandboxing, would work even if that iframe was sandboxed. The normal the normal protections that would be in place by like Google or like a reputable ad service wouldn't be able to block their attack, which uses kind of a bug in Chrome to do that session hijacking.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. It used a Chrome 0-day to circumvent the pop-up blocking.
Yeah, used took advantage of something in the user activated pop-up detection, except it doesn't require any user interaction.
Yeah, so that kind of reminds me. I don't think it's exactly the same thing, but it reminds me of another attack I've heard of before called like a pop under. So it'll
Yeah,
like
that would
pop
be
up.
different.
Yeah, it
Very,
is
very
different, but it's
different.
like the same. Like it's
Well, so they
that
haven't
style of
released details about. They're planning another post at some point, going into the details, but they haven't actually released any information about how this circumvents like the anti-redirect thing, how it violates same origin policy, and all of that. They haven't released that information yet. Just that it does do that.
Yeah, I heard they're planning on showing a POC soon. But it's what I think is cool about it is it's not like your typical typically when you hear about a Chrome vulnerability or anything, it's memory corruption, code execution, that kind of thing. I
I was
think
expecting that when I started reading this.
I was too. I think those kind of attacks, like bypassing policies and stuff, is it's not as flashy as code execution, so I don't think it gets as much recognition, I guess.
Oh no, I
If
still
that makes
see them
sense.
posted like, they'll get posted on Hacker News and like our NetSec and stuff. You'll still see these bypasses in there too. But
Yeah.
you've already stated you don't like web security, so you just don't pay attention to it.
Well,
Face
Well, I
it,
mean, this is
you
more
don't. You
browser.
don't seem to pay attention to that stuff.
Well, it's more browser though, right? Than like it, you know.
Well, usually these do have a bit of a web aspect to them. Like, it's AppSec.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I am more of a binary person, so of course with me with browsers, I am more interested in those bugs that give code execution, not just simply bypassing policies. But I still do think those are interesting, and those are maybe something I want to look into a bit more. Just because, you know, I think they're in a way they're a bit more clever, because I feel like
They
it's
take
different.
place at a different level of kind of the mental stack.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's generally true of AppSec. With binary stuff, like you need to really understand the deep technical details of what's going on, and then you abuse that a bit. But it's very, I kind of want to say linear when it comes to the binary exploits. Whereas with a lot of the AppSec stuff, you're dealing at a higher level. You're taking advantage of properly working functionality in ways that wasn't expected.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I thought was neat about this 0 day.
Looks like
So
we've
is that
got Anti
actually
joining us.
you actually joined at like a perfect time because we're talking about a malvertising campaign right now.
Oh
So
man, perfect.
your timing is impeccable. So
Awesome. There we
congratulations.
go.
He's been watching
Okay.
the entire episode, just waiting for us to get here. He's like, I don't want to talk about these other things, so let's just wait a bit.
Everything
Yeah,
else
there you
sounds too spooky, so I just waited at the right moment.
So actually, we were about to wrap up the story, but maybe you could shine a bit of light on the. So have you heard much about the eGobbler campaign?
No, so fill me in here. What are the deets? eGobbler, is that what they really named it?
At least they gave a reason for it.
They did give a reason, yeah. So the reason they called it eGobbler was it did hit a lot of impressions in the U.S., almost 500,000.
And it was loud.
Yeah,
Not very stealthy.
yeah, and so basically, what was the interesting part of it, Anti, was it basically used a Chrome 0 day to bypass pop-up blocking policies in the browser, to do like to hijack the browser to do like the redirect, page redirects and stuff like that.
Okay, so I mean, so the weird part is they had a 0 day, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Well, we
most
don't have a
sites-
lot of information over what exactly this 0 day looked like.
well, you know, the nice part.
What's that, sir? I'm
Yeah,
not
you
sure if you're gonna.
broke
Oh
up.
no, you cut out for a second. So okay, well, it was me then maybe.
Okay.
Whatever works. So what I'm trying to look at here is, you know, I always hate when it's through a company's website, just because I always get a little distrustful, you know. But you know, like most malvertising campaigns, don't leverage 0 days to my knowledge. And if they do, it's like we've talked about before. Like I don't often see Chrome targeted. Like, and
Well,
there's a lot of
so to be clear here, just fill you on the details. This isn't a Chrome 0 day that gets remote code execution. This is a Chrome 0 day to like bypass the same origin policy, to bypass the no redirecting the page from like your sandbox iframe.
That's still a pretty good technique when you're looking at malvertising, right?
Yeah, sure. It's just it is different from kind of what we normally would talk about it when it comes down to
Yeah. I mean, if it was remote code execution, I mean, they'd be in the big money, dude. They don't even need to be a criminal about it. Just go to Google or something, right? Or shit, dude, put that in an exploit kit. I'm pretty sure they could find a lot more success. I'm just surprised. How many people did you say it targeted successfully?
It hit over 500,000 impressions on one day. So I'll bring it up again. There's
so they use the number 500. I read this as 500 million, but 500 mm.
Yeah. Okay.
500 million. That'd be pretty incredible.
Yeah. So that's the web eGobbler blocked impressions. So that's just based on. They must offer something that gave them insight to this. I'm guessing, right? Do they offer some type of endpoint protection or some nonsense?
Confion. I'm not sure. I don't know too much about the company. I haven't looked too much into. I think that's a company, right? Yeah.
To be clear, it was 500 million. Total.
Wow.
Oh, total. Okay. So it wasn't. Yeah. Okay. That is more crazy than I thought, though. I didn't realize.
500 million blocked requests. Is that, see, like the hard part is like these stats are always kind of fucking stupid because of the fact that like, yeah, 500 million user sessions. That's insane.
That is estimated though. Like that's not an exact figure or anything.
Even if you're like 400 million, oops to 100 million, like that's massive. Like, and
yeah, which is why they got the name, the eGobbler, because they were loud and generated a lot of hits.
That's very fascinating. I'll have to read up more on this because, yeah, I would love to see better stats on it as opposed to just we estimate that this many user sessions and so on. It's hard to know what those mean. How are they handling the sessions? Is it like constantly refreshing sessions so that 100,000 users turned into 500 million because of improper session management or whatever it is? Like stats are always kind of weird like that. But this is interesting. It is interesting, and shout out to the eGobbler folks for figuring out that little Chrome trickery, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting trick, I'd say.
Yeah, it would be nice if they provided a little bit more information on how they collected those statistics. Maybe I'm missing something in the article that mentions that, but I don't think there is anything.
No, it's definitely light on details.
Yeah. So
yes, it just shows different domains and how many. I mean, yeah, it's too, and this is a big problem in threat intel because you obviously want to show that you have the big balls. Is look at what we got, and no one else can tell you shit because only we found it. So it sucks, But it's an interesting story. I hope they put out more information once it's fully kind of triaged and shit.
Yeah, so I think just before you joined, they did state that they would be releasing a POC eventually on how the Chrome pop-up block bypass worked. They don't have any technical details out right now, probably because they're, it's probably in the patch phase or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, they're probably going to put out some information about that. So maybe when they put out that, they also put out a little bit more information. More information about the ad campaign itself.
No, awesome. I'd love to take a look at it once. We'll have to redo it and go off of the real information, not this blog post.
Yeah, well, maybe if they release more technical information,
man, we're the Cynic Club.
Just over here like it's garbage. They didn't give me the raw JSON data. I don't want it.
Yeah. So I guess we sum that up. So we can go to the security researchers creating a backdoor inspired by the NSA malware. I think it was Double Pulsar that it was inspired by.
Yeah, that's the one that kind of gave the inspiration. And yeah, what's kind of stealthy about this one is it doesn't bind to any sockets, doesn't open any ports, as I say there, doesn't hook into any existing functions. Instead, it uses an undocumented API in the srvnet.sys process, and it'll register itself to handle incoming server message block messages. So in that way, it's able to listen on that port, but it's listening on something that's already been bound. Like something else is already legitimately listening for this, and it's just registered itself as a handle. It's completely legitimate, and the only way you're really detecting this by going and looking exactly for that. Like, it's not being picked up by any antivirus at this point, as far as I'm aware. The downside is this is kernel land.
Yeah.
It needs to be signed. So the example here obviously is unsigned. It's not weaponized. Now, can an APT get around that? Of course they can. Of course they'll be able to get a way to sign it. But what's been released isn't signed. It's not ready to go like the Double Pulsar was. It's just inspired by that sort of backdoor.
That's not bad. That's not bad. I kind of like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say it's not really malicious. It's not weaponized, is what I gathered. But what I thought was an interesting point of it was that there's always been a debate about, the NSA leaked malware, like how dangerous that was in terms of inspiring other attacks that are stealthy or as like close to nation state level as those as that malware was. Now, in this case, it's not weaponized. Like you said, you can't really run unsigned kernel code anymore in modern Windows versions.
Well, not without explicitly going and disabling it, which most of your users aren't just going to, oh yeah, sure, I'm installing a new Candyland, let me just disable signature enforcement.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it even says here it's mostly an academic exploration. But I think it does, lend some credence into that discussion that, like, these are some things that we are going to need to watch out for, especially from nation state level attacks, is using these kinds of things. Because, like you said, nation states will have that access to potentially get a signing certificate to get this code into kernel. So that's probably the main thing that interested me about this article, was that connection to the inspiration from the NSA malware.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I think this is the way to go about some of that research. Releasing something that kind of illustrates it, but can't just be taken by your script kiddies. I mean, I'm not super worried about giving you techniques to the NSA or to the government, because they're going to come up with stuff anyhow. I'm not too worried about that. But opening it up so now more people are kind of having their eyes open to these types of attacks, and having researchers look at this and release it in a way that completely explains it. It's not just hiding details, but so that it can't really be weaponized too readily. Like I said, APTs absolutely are going to be able to weaponize this. There are ways around that, but your average script kiddie, not so much. I'm not going to expect this to be in I don't know, what's a popular rat nowadays?
Dark Comet.
Is Dark Comet still used?
I don't know, actually.
Legit,
probably...
Andy, what's a common script kiddie, just having some rat?
I mean, a common one I'd say is Azerol is the one.
Oh,
but
okay,
I mean,
yeah.
People still modify Dark Comet and all that stupid shit.
Yeah, I've been surprised by kind of the lasting of Dark Comet, especially because the author kind of disowned it. But I mean, yeah, Dark Comet's still around and stuff. I don't think Brutus is still used. There's what, sub 7? Go way back.
I think they still. What's funny is every time I think, I'm like, there's no way people still use this shit. People still use these things sometimes, man, because it's so easy. It's so well documented. Even tools from 2007, it's been modified with so much functionality. A lot of account takeover tools like Sentry MBA, shit's been around since early 2000s. And people are still modifying it and re-releasing it. So I mean, but in regards to this, you know what I mean? I don't see even a rat developer having the technical know-how to go and weaponize this properly. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. This can't just be readily weaponized, but it can be shared as research, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no, this is actually, I think, a good effort by the researcher, because, not to point names or anything like that, but there are a lot of people that release shit and oh, but see, I'm doing it because I'm a good guy. But you're like, dude, you just released full exploits that haven't even been patched yet.
Yeah.
What are you doing, bro?
Yeah, in this case, he does release source, but because it can't be weaponized, it's useful to show the issue.
Yeah, well, and anyone that can weaponize it, dude, already probably has plenty more than just this at their disposal, that they're not probably all that concerned, or they've already known about it for some time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the source here on or screen share. Just it's all just right there for you to see what it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but
I don't want to start talking about the code.
Well, oh no, not the code. I was going to talk a bit more about the responsible disclosure stuff. I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but I remember talking in the past with you about it, and you were saying you hate, or not that you hate, but you're not a fan of public disclosure, right? At least
correct. I'm not a fan of public disclosure simply because I'm not a fan of giving script kiddies those easy to use tools just to take it.
Yeah, so this style of disclosure is a nice middle ground to be able to, give those technical details for those people like us who are interested in it, but can't be weaponized. And
can only be weaponized by people that aren't script kiddies.
Yeah,
I mean, I know the whole term script kiddie, script kiddie is kind of a loaded term. I know. I mean, I don't go around calling people script kiddies a lot, but in this context, I'm just referring to that type of person.
Yeah. Yeah, the person who just uses tools to do bad stuff and doesn't care about how they work. But yeah, I think that it's an interesting read in terms of like how technical it is, because like you said, it's not a common thing, especially considering it's
Yeah, it's a
it
cool
can't be
idea.
weaponized. Yeah,
It's a nice idea.
yeah. So time to get a bit political.
Yeah, let's start talking about the Mueller report.
That's the only time I joined for him.
Oh man, yeah, I know. I
Yeah, I
figured you'd have a
mean,
lot to say in it.
honestly, it really confirmed what I think most of us pretty much expected. That yes, Russia has hacked government. Yes, Russia has compromised. In this case, they mentioned specifically the Illinois State Board of Elections. Um, they have done some spear phishing campaigns against execs on voting machines. It sounds like so this thing doesn't say SQL injection. It talks about injecting malicious SQL though. So it sounds like some government websites were vulnerable to like SQL, and they were able to inject malicious SQL to get data back out. Pretty much sounds like SQL injection, but they don't call it that.
I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, but it is really stupid. That's
Honestly,
such, like,
who could be surprised though anymore?
I
And
mean,
like,
this
yeah, I
was
know.
expected.
what was this a local? Was this a county or a state? What was this one?
So
Oh,
it's talking
report.
about several things. This is just what the Mueller report apparently found. So it includes like the Florida, at least one county government in Florida was compromised. Talks about spear phishing of company executives that make the voting machines. The Illinois State Board of Elections. And
See,
several government websites. So they don't go into all the details about it. Just U.S. state and local entities like the State Board of Elections and county websites.
but I'm always curious how like these groups, like, I mean, dude, if you look at the level of like county voters and stuff like that, like who do you think is looking, and even at state, like they probably have like one IT guy shared between like 200 different government employees. Like I can't imagine anyone's surprised that the SBOE was compromised, probably by some old ass vulnerability. Let's be honest, and
probably. Yeah.
it's sadly a lot of these like even state websites, are just in terrible shape. No one's updating them. I mean, anecdotally, I've seen a lot of these, like a lot of the county ones. I thought that's what this was. A lot of county websites across the U.S. are just terrible. And not even in a vulnerable, but just a general approach at securing and usability. I can't imagine this hasn't happened many a times before. It's just people are starting to figure it out.
Yeah,
Like,
I think to be fair here, like it's not just the U.S. Like obviously we're talking about the U.S. because this is related to that Mueller report, which is specifically about election tampering, like in the 2016 election. But I remember, like, I've run into so many kids that like their first big hack is some random government website. Like not necessarily U.S. government, just some random like GovCo UK or like Gov North Korea or something, like just random government websites, because just on a whole the governments aren't super well funded to start doing that, unless you start looking at probably NSA, CIA, like the really some have big funding, but in general just there just isn't a lot of time and money to be put into the security for governments in general.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just gonna touch on that. I mean, maybe not SQL injection, but you can find a lot of XSS just searching Google Dorks on government domains. Like that's how easy it is to find like some issues. So
Oh, for sure. And like Andy said, probably even just old issues like unpatched, running an old WordPress or something. I don't know, but
I mean, look
yeah.
at, if you go to HackerOne, Department of Defense has their program, right? I mean, they hide basically as many statistics as they can from you, but they show that they think 830 hackers, right? And it's just hackerone.com/department DEPT of defense, right? Like what
yeah,
I think's interesting is this is the top dog in the U.S. Government as far as I'm concerned, right? The Department of Defense. We're talking at least, that's just at least 800 vulnerabilities, I assume, right? If there's 830 separate hackers, and some could have reported multiple. So, at least 800 in the Department of Defense. How easy do you think it is to find way more across the entire U.S., different governments and stuff like that, not just the Department of Defense. So that's where like I'm not even remotely surprised that they won't. I'm actually more surprised we didn't see it was rampant in the Mueller report. Where it's just like everything they're seeing is like Jesus, everything's getting hacked. You
What
know what
I
I
was
mean?
surprised by was actually just the fact they were using Word document Trojans in their spear phishing campaign. Like, I mean, I get that that's common. It just, I don't know. It just seems so weird that people are still falling for that.
Yeah.
Like, especially Word, not PDF or anything, just straight up Word document.
Now,
Yes.
I remember reading a little bit about this story last week. There, what was attacked with the SQL injection? Was there one system specifically? Because I feel like I remember hearing something about a voting system being vulnerable to SQL injection, but I don't know
So
if
I'm
I'm
not sure
correct
about
on that.
that. In this thing, they do talk about them trying to compromise the voting system, like executives.
The which, sorry?
They do talk about trying to compromise the voting system, like the manufacturer, the executives of the company through the spear phishing.
Oh, okay.
They do talk about that in this report. This thing seems to talk like it just says like they ran the malicious SQL code on the website, then ran commands on the underlying database to extract information. Like it sounds like they're just dumping a database, but it's a website of state and local election offices. I don't think this one actually talks about SQL injection on the voting machines themselves. But I know we were talking about voting machine vulnerabilities a couple weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I wish they were a bit more specific about what kind of data was exfilled. They don't really get any, like it's again very vague. They don't really say what was
Only
extracted.
they would dump the information for us.
I know, they should just publish the dumps.
Hey Russia, if you're listening.
I mean, like, obviously there's probably legal reasons and confidentiality and stuff. There are reasons that they can't get too specific, but at least like a high level overview would be nice of what kind of data was taken, especially from a voting office. Like it would be nice to see, were vote tallies specifically found, and if that's the case, then
So I'm not
that
sure,
stuff
but
is
I
already
think
public.
there's
So
I think there's still an investigation going on related to some of this because the Mueller
Probably.
report is specifically about Trump's relation with both collusion and the elections. So I think there's like another investigation going on that's going more just like into Russia and like they're tampering with the election. It's not going into like it's not focused on Trump's relation to any of that. So I think that's still ongoing, and perhaps once that is done, we might have more information, or maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too political, but I mean, I think Trump was pretty much, they said there's no more indictments coming, so I don't think that there's a proven connection between Trump and
Well, so that's what the Mueller
Russian
report
entities, but
was, and yeah, that's what the conclusion was. Like that, there wasn't like Trump didn't hire Russia to help him win the election. Is the gist of it.
But Russia still did it in the benefit of their own self-interests, and
Yeah.
basically this article
So
talks
I think
about
there's
a little
more
bit about
going
how they did it.
into looking at that. This is just kind of what overlapped with that investigation. Is it my understanding? Oh no, Auntie, you're the American here.
Yeah, I mean, what is the full question that you're passing my way?
Is there more of an investigation going on into just what Russia's been doing in terms of the election, or was the Mueller report it?
So, like, it's kind of hard to say. From what I've understood, the Mueller report was kind of looked at for a long time as like the end all be all of like collusion, this and that, right? And it's really it was meant to be the thing that was kind of like the final blow to the Trump presidency. Now, with the report coming out, and besides the fact that's heavily redacted, so it's really not easy to necessarily paint a full picture, there's kind of this back and forth that our goal was to show that Russia was influencing the election in multiple ways. If we're looking at this thing right here, like I gotta be honest with you, sometimes I feel like people blow so much smoke around shit that if you kind of read what's going on, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be worried that this data was compromised, but they talk about the information about US voters. So that could be as simple as my name is Auntie. I voted, Republican for 2 years or whatever the fuck, right? Like, and it sounds very scary. I know that there's political profiling and you can use that for further targeting, but like, I think that a lot of these sway the opinion in the way that most Americans, when they think of the election was hacked, they think of it like Russia is directly hacking additional votes into your system,
Like
right?
vote manipulation.
Yeah, like I think that's where this loss is kind of happening. Is it's not just that, yes, they're taking information about voters and probably carrying out like influence campaigns is really what you're seeing a lot of, right? They know who's what voting with this and that, right? And so they target you with campaigns and meme pages against Hillary or Trump or whatever, right? So I think that's really honestly what a lot of people are seeing, but they're taking it as like shit like this is they've hacked these machines and now they're giving themselves extra votes for the candidate they want, which to my knowledge is not what's happening here. And by the way, I did want to point out if you looked at it, I saw this one on Roll Call, the same article. It was basically saying that the Volusia County was affected by the GRU attack. Like someone in the local county fell victim to these spear phishing. So I'm genuinely always curious who these victims are, because it's like, again, if you're a little county employee, are you going to have half a clue how to deal with a nation state apparatus that's like, here, open this Word document that won't do anything bad?
We
Absolutely
promise.
great. Like I always feel genuinely bad for people who open this shit and they're like, fuck, how was I supposed to know, dude? I just check the water in this place. I don't do anything else.
Yeah, I can definitely get that feeling for them because, I mean, especially a lot of them probably aren't that tech literate either. Like I said, just
Most of
check the
them.
water. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but
Dude, I mean, you'd be amazed how many people have emails and have unknown access to things because they're just on a network. You know
yeah.
what I mean? They don't even realize what they have access to because they're just someone that comes in and organizes the papers, and then boom, someone exploits them like, oh shit, I'm on the network now. Like that's the hard part. But to kind of reiterate your point, I don't think most Americans, they were kind of looking for the Mueller report to be the smoking gun. And I don't think both sides are already so entrenched in their own beliefs. I don't think it really budged much
Well,
realistically.
so my question was more about whether or not there's still more investigations ongoing, specifically into just Russia's interference.
Well, your question was wrong. No, as for the investigation, I don't think so. I mean, that was the conclusion of the report. It should
Okay,
be
see,
noted.
I thought that the Mueller report was specifically on
It
Trump in relation to that, and that an investigation may have been spun out of the Mueller investigation now into the Russia.
I bet you there's a lot more going on in the background. It's just not talked about, right?
Yeah, fair
So,
enough. I mean,
you know,
this
I
is getting a little bit political. It's
no. That's I would just say that there's probably more going on in the background that people don't really know about. But the Mueller report was kind of seen as this golden light. Trump is still under investigation in New York, not for collusion, but for tax evasion. So, for anyone doing little chalk lines on their sidewalk or something, there's another one to look out for.
now
Yeah,
here's the
I mean,
question: is Russia trying to get Trump to open a Word document?
Is Russia? Is he trying to
sorry,
what?
can you repeat that for a second?
Is Russia spearfishing Trump?
You don't have to spearfish someone who texts you. I'm just kidding.
I
I'm just
mean,
kidding. I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm obviously an outsider, and I didn't follow the Mueller report too much because it's just a lot of political bullshit. But I mean, my overall thought on it was that it was a bunch of investigations that were all summed up into one report, that was the umbrella for a bunch of smaller
Okay.
investigations.
You know what? I think we
I
can
might be
kind of
wrong.
move on from.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that was like how I thought of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Fair enough.
Essentially, it was investigations, and they were all brought together by Mueller, our boy Mueller,
yeah.
or no one's boy Mueller. Whoever doesn't assassinate me is what I believe.
Yeah. So moving on from there, though, we've got this. This is kind of going to be our last topic here. Using power anomalies to detect malware, specifically in embedded systems. To be fair, it's not just like you're not going to replace your antivirus with a power monitoring system. But I think this is kind of cool because it makes sense. Malware, on an embedded system, when it's going to try and attack, like, Rowhammer, it's going to use more power. There's going to be a power spike. So instead of trying to detect that one of those attacks are ongoing, which requires adding more code in there, just becoming less efficient, look at the power usage and determine if there's something going on that way. So that's basically what this is about. It's pretty much exactly what's on the title. The full paper isn't being released until next week, late next week, I think.
Okay.
No, sorry. Early, like on the 6th or 7th, I think, is when the
May 6th to 10th.
6th or 10th, there we go, is when the actual paper will be released. But the principle here is, I think, pretty obvious. You look for those power spikes, those power anomalies, because your embedded systems are generally going to be pretty either consistent or at the very least pretty predictable in how much power is being used.
Okay, so I was going to say, would there be a potential for a bunch of false positives there? But I think
maybe not false positives, but it can be fooled, which they did find. Like, if it were to reduce its usage in order to have like a more normal power usage, but that also requires slowing down everything. They said it would have to slow down by like 60 to 90% or something. Like, oh, there we go, 36 to 7 x lower bandwidth is what it was. So like a very significant slowdown in order to not trigger any sort of power spike. It sounds like they looked at the Rowhammer attack as their example for a lot of these. So that's where I think they're getting the 36 to 7 x lower usage. But I mean, the interesting thing is this is an out-of-band detection mechanism. You're getting it from the battery, presumably, chip in the battery reporting power usage. So it can be fooled by reducing the power usage, but... sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, without getting into like too many technical details, can you just go into like a little bit of a high-level overview of the Rowhammer stuff? Because that is a bit older. I'm a bit fuzzy on what exactly those attacks entailed.
A basic idea is it just keeps trying to mess with data that is physically like around the actual data that you want to modify, and eventually doing that will actually flip bits in the rows that are physically like next to.
So yeah, like a glitch attack kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like by flipping the bits that are really close to it, eventually you'll flip the bit. Like just as a side effect, it'll flip the bit next to it.
Yeah, okay.
So you do that like a ton of times per second. It's not like you just flip that once or twice and you get it. But that's kind of the gist of Rowhammer.
So it's basically just trying to detect, using the power to cause glitches and...
Well, it would detect how you start using more power when you do something like that. Because you're running more commands. Because the power isn't causing the glitch.
Yeah. A quick thing I have for you, Andy, before we wrap this up is, do you think that this will be a useful technique in terms of preventing nation-state attacks? Because I'm just thinking, I remember, Stuxnet with the attack against Natanz. Do you think like this technique could be used to help prevent situations like that? Or like not that specific situation, but just like, those kinds of nation-state level attacks?
Oh man, it's gonna stop nation states right away. We're never gonna have cybercrime again, dude. Like, we are set. I mean,
I said like right at the beginning there, it can be fooled just by reducing your speed, just by not using that power.
But yeah, I mean, see, that's just I'm telling you, man, it's too good. No, it's I think like if you scroll down, what's funny that I noticed what I was reading, if you scroll down a bit, keep going a little bit. Okay, stop. So I was laughing.
What? Okay.
Yeah, right there. It's good. It was like, oh, they're presenting it at they're presenting it in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, which is like notoriously like the place where a lot of feds are and contractors and shit, right?
Okay.
So I was cracking up too, because I'm like, wow, that's so weird. Why would they focus on this? It's interesting. And then I see, oh, this done with support from Lockheed Martin. Who,
Yeah.
So I was like, this is fascinating. So I mean, it doesn't really add much, but I thought it was hilarious because I was like, this totally screams like something that like isn't going to be normally used in a even in an enterprise that's worth billions of dollars, it's just not practical for your little SOC analyst to be like, yeah, it spiked up to 15% power. Like, what the fuck? Like that doesn't work well enough. But I do think that this could be helpful for when you are talking like an actual government entity that has something like you were mentioning Stuxnet that has a very predictable output, right? I don't know enough. I don't work with power and shit like that to know enough, but I do envision that most times these things are essentially they're at a very known percentage because it has to be that way. Otherwise, bad things happen, right?
Yeah,
So
and that's
again,
what they say here is that the nature of these sorts of micro-architectural attacks, like the Rowhammer, are difficult to detect, but we have a good idea of what the power consumption looks like when they're operating normally. And that's the key thing. These are embedded systems. This isn't like
yeah.
your server or something. This
Mhm.
is embedded.
No, that makes even more sense. An embedded system's even easier to kind of get a baseline, right?
Yeah.
That so that no, I was ready to crap all over this, but I actually think it's pretty interesting. I'm surprised no one's really thought of it till now. I guess is what's weird to me.
Or maybe
This
they
seems
did
like
think about this like 20 years ago and they're just like, hey, we should maybe tell people about it now. So let's
we
come
should.
up with this fake person to publish.
I mean, it's totally possible, man. Like maybe it's just like, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here you go. Like I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, but this is definitely something aimed at the U.S. government. They're presenting in like Virginia with Lockheed Martin. I don't know. I love it though. It's pretty cool. I actually like this.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you
I mean,
you originally didn't, now you like it.
Yeah, I mean, just based on the names, I was like, what the hell? I saw malware. I saw malware, and I was like, hold on a second, man. I was like, ID malware and embedded systems. I was like, this is starting to feel like one of those papers that I read, and it's just like people throwing words around. They're like, when the microsystems, when they subpulse the, you're like, what the hell is this talking about? I have no clue. No, this actually makes sense once you read into it a bit more. That's why I try to caution people when they hear like malware and this and that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, okay, but this is a good way to kind of move forward against those very sophisticated, I don't want to say sophisticated attacks, just the lesser known and ones that aren't able to be monitored in a conventional way.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that sums that up. And that wraps up the podcast. So one question for you though, Z, are you good for next week? I just
I
wasn't
should
sure.
be.
Okay. Okay.
Guess we'll
So
find
yeah,
out next week.
I guess we'll find out next week. So yeah, so that sums up this episode. Thanks for tuning in. So we will probably see you next week for episode 8. Because eventually Z will be going on a hike, so we'll talk a bit
Eventually, it'll
about
disappear, and this will just be a monologue with Andy and
yeah,
Spectre.
it'll just
with
be
just
me
Spectre
monologuing
talking.
with with Andy occasionally popping in.
I'll just have to stop scheduling on Mondays.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about that more, when it gets closer to that. But at least for now, we should be back again next week. So we'll keep you guys updated on that. And yeah, so we will see you guys next week.